Thank you very much for joining us today on Arabian Business, Khalid. And obviously we're talking on the eve of the G20, which is being hosted, albeit virtually, by Saudi Arabia. So kind of by way of an introduction from your perspective at Mastercard, what do you think we'll learn from those conversations at the G20 about the economic landscape in 2021? And what kind of solutions and what kind of topics do you hope to be hearing?
I think the focus on digital, which we have been preaching for the last couple of decades, and certainly over the last few years, we don't need to do that anymore because consumer behavior has shifted in a way which is actually driving all businesses, industries to say, well, focusing on digital is not a luxury or a nice to have, or even a channel strategy that you do off the side of your desk. It's actually a business model critical go-to-market strategy to ensure survival of your business. And why is that happening? Well, that's happening because of consumers having been forced to be in lockdown for a few months. And even lockdown, after lockdown has been relaxed a bit. Consumers are still kind of carrying around concerns mentally related to safety and security and health, which is driving e-commerce spends in areas which were not previously on e-commerce. So the amount of delivery that consumers and households are resorting to now for basic commodities that they were happier doing in a physical space previously has already taken place. Today, when we talk to consumers, 3/4 and more are saying, well, we're not going to go back. We're not going to change back to our old habits. We're actually happy with the new habits that we've discovered. And regardless of, post-COVID, whatever happens post-COVID, we're actually pretty comfortable with contactless. We're pretty comfortable buying stuff on e-commerce from a variety of websites. We've actually discovered home entertainment. So I don't know what that would mean for, entertainment in cinemas. We know that many blockbuster movies have been delayed by more than a year. So I'm giving real examples of this tectonic shift in consumer behavior and market landscapes that is actually driving digital. That's on one end. On the second end, equally importantly, is governments finally recognizing the importance of being digital themselves. And I'm not just talking about the usual suspects, like digital identity and so on, but even in some of the markets in which we operate across Middle East and Africa, governments have found themselves constrained in terms of disbursing benefits to their citizens, which they needed to do during the early months of COVID, because there was no digital means, quick and easy and secure means of disbursing benefits. Digital capability enables you to do that. So governments are finally say, well, this is not just good, this is critical for us to also provide the services required to our citizens, right? To the nationals of this country, who we are responsible for. So a variety of things are happening, and I believe the discussions as far as let's say the world economy is concerned should and will have a strong focus on this changing landscape and these tectonic shifts, and then how do you succeed in this normal, not the new normal? How do you succeed in the normal, which is already started? Travel is going to be different. Tourism is going to be different. Education is already different. Businesses and meetings. I was just having a discussion today morning, and say, well, we can travel now. We can, in a limited way, and meet customers. And I think the question is, do customers actually want to meet us physically, not just what we want to do? Because the landscape is changing. So, and we've seen the rise of platforms like the platform that we're using now, you and I, to speak together. And, I say to myself, well, this is pretty efficient. This is pretty effective. And it's actually better cost. The space that businesses allocate to kind of brick and mortar offices, that will be revisited. There was a day when people were saying, smart kind of management and, hot desking, was like kind of fashionable at one point in time. this is actually the norm that we're doing now, and businesses are running and they're working. So I think this has been more of a wake-up call, a bit of a shock therapy type of wake-up call to say the world needs to be different and will be different. And I think that will create a lot more efficiencies than ever before.
I mean, the theme of the G20 in Saudi Arabia this year is realizing opportunities in the 21st century for all. And I think that some of the things that you just touched on there is leading to that. It's providing a space where opportunities and democratization of information and access and mobility and transportation that this sort of new environment has created can actually give rise to that. How do you see Mastercard enabling and powering these new trends?
Excellent. Well, look, I mean, we globally, we always say, and we have been saying, we'll continue to say that at Mastercard, we do well by doing good. So while, many organizations look at inclusion as charitable giving, we look at inclusion as our business strategy, including people in the digital ecosystem. And you will notice that I didn't say the digital payment ecosystem. I said in the digital ecosystem, because our business is not just payments. Our business is payments, our business is data, our business is security, our business is service and consultancy, etc. So it's a very diversified business, of which payment is obviously something that we do. But including customers, and I call them payers, not customers, right? Because it could be an individual like you and me. It could be a micro enterprise, somebody selling vegetables on the side of the street in some of the rural areas of Egypt. It could be a micro or a medium-sized enterprise, with 5 to 10, 15 employees. It could be a government institution. It could be a port authority. It could be a customer authority, etc. These are all payers and receivers of payment. Driving that inclusion in a way whereby, yes, we will create value for the ecosystem. We will make money. But what is always at the back and the forefront of our mind is do well, because doing well by people is a way, do good, because doing good by people and by individuals and entities and governments is the best way, to do well from a financial results perspective. So doing well by doing good. Now, how do we approach this? Well, we believe in the power of partnerships, which very much speaks to, some of the kind of themes, in the G20. We don't do this ourselves, right? We are an enabler. Many times we're an orchestrator, which bring market players together, right? We look at ourselves as connecting kind of entities, right? Connecting governments, connecting payers, right? And using our technology to do that. So, in Saudi Arabia, there's an example. We've partnered with the Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority, Saudi Payments, and brought in our multi-rail capabilities to Saudi. Multi-rail basically means, not necessarily relying on a plastic or a card to make a payment. It doesn't really matter where the transaction starts or where the transaction ends, right? It could be starting from an account, so you can pay by account, directly from your account rather than by your card. You can pay by a card, you can pay by mobile, etc. So these are multi-rail capabilities which our technology enables to do that. So that partnership, which is driven by our VocaLink acquisition, which is the largest kind of ACH or real-time payment provider in the UK and more broadly across Europe, it enables us to do that. Our partnership in Egypt with the local national switch that is owned, by the Central Bank of Egypt, which enabled us to launch a full interoperable kind of mobile payment platform, which today has 14 million people on it, making everyday payments, making about over 100 million transactions per year, right? So, and it connects the telcos, the Vodafones, it's Salats of this world, and the banks, and anybody else who has a captive customer base and who's willing to get on, issue a wallet, and let people, transact, right? And there are many, many other examples. So power of partnerships and the capability that we synergize through these partnerships is critically important. Partnerships are not limited to the usual partnerships, i.e., private, entity partnerships. Many of our partnerships are actually with governments, with regulators, with local switches, domestic switches, local fintechs that are in each of these markets, and that truly unlocks, the power that we're talking about. with the aim ultimately of driving inclusion and doing good, because that will end up in us doing well. And the numbers of people that we've included speak for themselves. We've made global commitments. So I've described to you some of the things we do locally, right? But we've also made global commitments. So it's one vision, it's one thought process, it's one conviction and belief across the board, from the top to the bottom, or from the bottom to the top, right? We made global commitments. We pledged $250 million, right, in financial technology capabilities, etc., over the next 5 years to enable small businesses across the globe. And as part of our global commitment to bring 1 billion people into the digital ecosystem, that we've included in that 50 million small businesses, but with a direct focus on enabling and including 25 million women entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of stuff that we're doing which speaks to our conviction, our belief, our vision of doing well by doing good. And I think that very much is aligned with the G20 and how we're driving this success through partnerships.
It's interesting that the coronavirus pandemic, well, I'll stick to this region specifically for now, we've seen two things. We've seen a surge in startup activity, with people either seeing a new opportunity in the pandemic and finding ways that they can launch businesses to exploit the opportunities that's created. We've also seen small companies pivot to take up some of these new opportunities. But we've also seen a lot of SMEs struggle. I mean, there was an apocalyptic report that we carried in Arabian Business earlier on in the year that said something like 70% of regional SMEs do expect to have cataclysmic financial problems in which they will consider shutting down during 2020. We hope, obviously, that doesn't come to pass. But how big a focus is the SME and startup base for Mastercard, and what kind of solutions and guidance and support can you offer this group of businesses to help them navigate what have been very tricky waters for some, but also help them to scale and grow where they have actually seen and exploited an opportunity?
We are, quite supportive of driving the success of this segment, because it is foundational to any economy, to any market in which we operate, or the success and the GDP growth in any such market, just looking at their employment metrics that I just mentioned and the portion of GDP. Now, regrettably, SMEs probably, and of course, this is not a stereotypical type of broad brush statement that I'm making, but broadly, very broadly, they may not be as resilient as some of the larger companies that have deep pockets and investment capabilities, or some of the companies that have, or entities that have ventured into the digital ecosystem and the digital space earlier on. So actually quickly responding to these tectonic shifts in business models, and particularly getting into the digital space, sometimes can be a challenge. And as we all know, most of the SMEs that fail do not fail because they don't have a good business idea, or do not fail because they're not profitable, fail because of poor working capital management, i.e., collecting the money that they have out there, et cetera, and managing working capital effectively. So what are we doing to help that sector altogether? Well, we're trying to give them off-the-shelf, ready-made, plug-and-play solutions to accelerate the transition to the digital space, because they won't be able to create these themselves. And it is our role as a market orchestrator or facilitator to enable them to do that at pace. So in Saudi Arabia, we're piloting, tap on phone technology, which turns any Android smartphone into an acceptance device. Now, why is that relevant to SMEs? Well, guess what? SMEs tomorrow, instead of having to invest in a few $100 kind of point of sale terminal, they can actually turn an Android phone into an acceptance device. But that's technology that we were bringing to market. We have partnered in the UAE with one of the leading banks, RAK Bank, to launch Simplified Commerce Solution. And what is that? Well, it's a solution that enables basically players to create their own online store seamlessly and quickly, and start accepting digital payments immediately, manage invoices, minimize fraud versus an online portal. That's kind of, again, an off-the-shelf plug-and-play type solution. we have something called local market intelligence, which is LMI for short, which allows acquirers, these are the banks that acquire the transaction, who place the point of sale in each of the outlets when we go shopping, allows acquirers to offer value-added reporting to their merchants to know how well they're doing versus the comparable merchants in that same area. But that's not where it stops. What's more relevant to LMI is that it can also be made available to merchants by acquirers through the Merchant Services Portal. We have SME in a Box, which is a program that we have across our region, and certainly in my small patch of Middle East, North Africa, which enables owners of SMEs, companies, to have a quick and simple way to digitize their businesses, right? Again, and the name actually speaks for itself. It's SME in a Box, right? So you just take it and you implement it, right? And through that same platform, SMEs can create a simple payment link, right? And I'm sure many of us have just gone in, bought stuff, and somebody sends us a payment link on email. We click it, we pay, we get the product or the good or the service. So it enables them to create a simple payment link and accept payments remotely from their customers and manage their everyday cash register. If you take it higher level, globally, we have a global program called StartPath, right, which incubates and provides data, capital, know-how, etc., to fintech startups that are actually making their way into this brave new world that we're living in or that we're creating. And since 2014, we have invited, I think, over 200, or I think maybe over 230 later stage startups worldwide to participate in our 6-month virtual program, providing technical guidance and whatnot. And these startups, in this growing network, have gone on to raise $2.7 billion in post-program capital and collaborate with Mastercard. So many proof points. Most of them local, regional, which is what I started out with, and many of them actually global in nature. But that's just evidence and validation of the fact that we're not leaving this to divine providence and kind of conjecture, but we're actually walking the talk and practicing what we preach, right? And being there for this critically important segment to the economies in which we live and operate.
I mean, obviously, we've seen certain sectors do very, very well during the pandemic, things like e-commerce, retailers, things that you've just outlined there, last mile delivery. In terms of payment solutions, the likes of contactless payment, which you've been at the forefront of. I think in March you reported you had 100% year-on-year growth of contactless payment. Do you see these as now baked in to consumer habits and consumer behaviors? And is this basically something that you will be taking on into 2021 in the years ahead, as like, this is now how people operate in the world, and Mastercard is very much at the forefront of delivering these solutions, and that 2020 has actually been an accelerator of trends that were probably happening already, but have led to a kind of a pivot point to like, right, this is now how things are done?
Sure. And look, I mean, I referred at the beginning of our conversation to these tectonic shifts, which was, I think, I would probably say probably a godsend to make people realize the importance of all of these new models and the fact that they're not luxuries or, not just like incremental additions, but they are what will define, hopefully, the better future that we will all be part of. And contactless has always been, we've always preached that contactless is a far, far better customer experience. And that was not even driven by health and safety and security. It's just a better customer experience. You have your card, you're in control of your card, and it has the same levels of security built around it. I think now we additionally have the driver of people wanting it to use it because of health-related matters, right? I.e. in some markets, they call it actually touchless transactions rather than contactless transactions. And I think that touchless is coming from the fact is I don't want to touch anything, right? So it's a touchless transaction. And as I was saying to you earlier, there was a day when you would actually spend enormous amounts of marketing money, and I'm not talking about us, I'm talking about any entity, in FMCG, in a variety of other industries, enormous amounts of money just to drive something called trial. And trial was driven by the fact that you had very high level of conviction that you actually had a great product, or you had a great process or a great service that you're bringing to the consumer, but you wanted to try it, and you were betting on the fact that after they tried it, they would like it so much that they would stay with it. Well, guess what? We've just gone through the massive and the strongest and the highest trial campaign in history, right? Because over the last 7-8 months, people have, wanted to try it. They've not been forced to try it, right? Because it was driven by a need for safety, health, security, and so on, right? And peace of mind. So now that we've gone through this, and I think according to, McKinsey reports and many other reports, and this answers another part of your question, we've seen a 5-year kind of acceleration kind of in digital adoption take place in a few months. I mean, this would have normally taken 5 years, right? Looking at the previous pace in which it's happening. But we've seen 5-year growth, right, in adoption, et cetera, in a few months, driven by kind of this strong need. So when you ask me, is this likely to stay? I would say, yeah, definitely yes. Not because of COVID, because it's a better customer experience. It is a safer customer experience, it's a more seamless customer experience. Now that they've tried it, right, driven by the factors that I mentioned, now that they've tried it, why would they switch back to a poorer process or a poorer experience? It would just not make sense, right? Nobody switches back to something that is less optimal than what they already tried now and they're happy with, right? So that's our firm belief that this is here to stay.
I want to ask you a bit of a light-hearted end question, and I really appreciate your time today. When was the last time you actually spent cash out of your pocket on a transaction?
Oh my God. Well, look, it's a great question. I can give you the corporate answer and the personal answer, right? The corporate answer, of course, would be, hey, at Mastercard, our vision is to create a world beyond cash. So as an employee in Mastercard, I would definitely say that's a vision I believe in, and it's true. And I'm saying this from my heart, but that's the corporate answer, right? Now, the personal answer is, I honestly can't remember the last time I carried cash. Now, I kind of carry some cash in my wallet. I have to be honest, right? I carry some cash in my wallet, but it's been there forever and a day, yeah? Because even if I wanted to spend cash, the merchants doesn't want to accept cash. So it's a two-way street here. By the way, those concerns that have forced this massive trial that I've described are not just on one side of the coin, they're on both. Because, I was in my cafe today morning, right? And there's no thought of even accepting cash by these people. Some merchants actually tell you, sir, we do not accept cash, right? Because they have also the same thoughts and issues on their mind. And frankly, for them, contactless is also a better experience.
When I was preparing for this, I thought, when was the last time I actually went to an ATM, withdrew money, and had it run out that I had to go again? It's been literally months. And I think that even when you're on the road, you go to somewhere like Dubai Safari or you're going to the mall, you just simply don't need to bring cash with you. And that revolution has been in front of our eyes. And I think that has definitely been baked into the system.
No, you're absolutely right. And if I kind of rewind our discussion back to when I was giving you that example of Egypt MPG, basically our mobile payment solution there, which has 14 million kind of transactors on it today as we speak, 14 million wallets. There's a cash in transaction. And, many of these markets, I mean, Egypt is no stranger to this, over 100 million population, very diverse, very fragmented, 26 governorates or more, et cetera, right? And it's a big patch, it's a big country. And many of these, citizens, they're not all salaried employees, right? Many are gig workers, many are kind of day-to-day workers and so on. And they, a lot of them make their money in cash. Previously, it was under the mattress or in the drawer type of cash. Today, a new habit has been created whereby for their own safety, because they travel long distances between their little village and their place of work, which is probably the closest city, which might be a 2-hour drive away or even more, right? And they do this daily or at least 4 or 5 times a week. And now they get that cash and they go to the nearest merchant in the network of merchants we established, which is several hundreds of thousands of merchants across, and they do a cash in and load that cash into their mobile wallet. Now, you can't steal cash from a mobile wallet. You can steal the phone, but guess what? You can replace a SIM card or get a new phone, and your cash that's in the wallet will still be there, right? That was not the case before. So a new habit has been created whereby, this segment, and this segment is a significant segment, it's in the tens of millions, right, is an unbanked segment because they may not be seen traditionally to be bankable, right? i.e. worthy of kind of making the revenue kind of KPIs that are required by many of the banks that have a lot, obviously, of overheads and branches and vaults and tellers and etc. Because they would be making a couple of $100 of income a month, right? So they may not be bankable, but they're actually treating this as their mobile bank now. They might not be making interest on it, but guess what? They would not have been able to make interest on it anyway because their disposable income is probably close to zero, right? Or their savings are close to zero, my apologies. Their savings are close to zero. They work hand to mouth, right? Whatever they earn is probably what they spend to keep their family and life afloat, right? So there's a new segment that has been created as a result of this. And that's just one small example. So the future is going to be very different. I believe the future, and I'm sorry for this cute cliche, the future is now. Yes, it is, but it's already started. And we're quite privileged and honored to be, one, not the, but one of the key enablers to this hopefully brighter future.